These ancient myths are all about sex and violence. You know, somebody getting their head or some other body part lopped off. What's specifically cool about Greek mythology is that the gods and the goddesses are so human. They look like us, they act like us. There's jealousy among the wives and their player husbands. There's competition, the threat of being overthrown.
We're starting to get into the story of the Titans. We're telling about this back and forth battle between the parents and the children of the gods and the Titans.
You will never be the ruler of Olympus. The cycle ends here.
Kratos has father issues. Kratos has family issues. It really is a story about fathers and sons, actually.
The death and deception between father and son is a classic theme of these myths. Kronos, the Titan, overthrowing his father Uranus, the sky, and then Zeus, the god, overthrowing his father Kronos.
There's always going to be purists. Certainly there are aspects of God of War which certain classicists will probably find inaccurate, but they are overlooking the fact that mythology is really the first form of entertainment.
Homer told these stories the way that would work best in 8th century Greece. We have to tell these stories for 21st century America and the rest of the world.
That's the good thing about a myth. It's not a textbook.
It needs to be a game. We got to be true to that. So we're going to take liberties. It's all done with a respect for Greek mythology.
You know, success isn't going back to obscure texts that deal with Greek mythology. It was more about what do people actually associate with these gods and these characters based on maybe what you had heard about Greek mythology as a kid or from watching movies and things like that.
I have lived in the shadow of the gods for long enough. The time of the gods has come to an end.
God of War explains, or ultimately will explain, why there are no more Greek myths. There's certainly the story of Kratos, but above that is really about, does man need God? You know, why does he need God?
And with 2, we're kind of pulling the camera back a little bit. If 1 was in close, and we were kind of telling the small story, and we hinted towards threads that connected to a much larger story, it's as if we're pulling back on this world map of God of War and saying, oh wow, there's something even bigger.
It's going to be hell on earth as these guys basically battle it out for who ultimately is going to be sitting in that throne. I think people will be very surprised with how this thing all comes to a head.
Zeus is the big one. Zeus is the king of the gods.
His name is related to the word for light. He's a sky god. He's in charge of the weather. In particular, he's in charge of thunder and lightning and the power that you associate with the sky.
Zeus is cool. I like to think of Zeus as the player god. You know, he's like the Mac Daddy of the gods, because Zeus is always finding some beautiful mortal babe, and he goes down and seduces or woos the babe and gets into all sorts of trouble. Usually though, since he's a god, what can you do to it? Nothing, right? Nothing.
Now I will show you the true power of a god.
The other gods are afraid of him, rightly so, because he's more powerful than they are. He seems to be more intelligent than they are, although not always, because he can be fooled. He's frequently fooled, actually.
I wanted Zeus to be the classical interpretation of Zeus. Zeus is the strong, powerful overseer of all of the gods. But I also wanted him to have a tiny bit of humanity, and the humanity being that he's afraid. He's kind of always looking over his shoulder.
Zeus is basically willing to, you know, let the world below be damned and crumble, and the humans that they lord over just, you know, suffer because he wants to hang on to his seat of power on Mount Olympus.
Olympus will prevail.
As the life drained out of Kratos, the arms of Hades reached out to claim their prize.
Hades is Zeus's brother, and Hades and Poseidon, 3 of them, split up the universe. Hades, by all accounts, got the short end of the stick.
He got sent down to the underworld where all the dead people went, right? The stiffs. For the Greeks, it wasn't a place of punishment. It wasn't like our sense of heaven and hell. People went there when they died, and everybody went there, good, bad, and indifferent.
You know, Hades, he's got his fierce helmet on with the spikes coming out, and he's got the spikes all over his armor, and that's the same kind of, the underworld is the same kind of feel. Grotesque shapes with very thorny, aggressive angles, very, very uncomfortable.
To go to the underworld and to come back is a very difficult thing. In general, the only people that do are either superhuman heroes or actual demigods. So it's a very unique thing. For most people, it's a one-way ticket. Poseidon is Zeus's other brother. Poseidon is in charge of all the seas and all the oceans and everything in them. Because in the Greek perspective, the oceans sort of held up the lands, Poseidon is also in charge of earthquakes.
He's got a trident, this three-pronged spear. And sort of like Zeus with his lightning bolts, you don't want to mess with Poseidon, because when he gets stirred up, the whole world gets stirred up, because he just takes his trident and he just starts churning that sea. Interestingly, a lot of people don't associate him with horses, but he was said to have fashioned the first horses, and he shaped them, if you think of a horse galloping, sort of like waves falling.
In the Iliad, Poseidon is likened to a child kicking over sandcastles when he goes to destroy the walls of Troy. So, like many gods, you do not want to mess with Poseidon.
Kratos, you know not what you do.
Athena, the gray-eyed Athena, the patron goddess of Athens. You know, her temple was on the Acropolis. She's the daughter of Zeus. She sprang out of his head in one of these great mythic moments that defy rationality. You can't explain it. That's what makes myths different.
Zeus gets a whopper of a headache, and she comes basically fully formed outside of his head.
In armor, helmet, breastplate, spear from the head of Zeus. And she's the goddess of war and wisdom, which is an interesting pairing.
Enough, Kratos! With every city you destroy, the wrath of Olympus grows. Soon I will no longer be able to protect you.
Athena is the kind of conflicted character in the game. She always wanted to help out Kratos. She had a little bit of empathy for him, and I want to infuse a little bit of that kind of like more than empathy for Kratos.
The sexual tension between Kratos and Athena is bizarre, because it wasn't intended, and we finished the first game, and it's like, are they doing it, those two?
Do not turn your back on me.
I owe you nothing.
Then you leave me no choice.
Her loyalty is to the gods, so she wants to keep the peace. And she always kind of walks that fine line, and she's conflicted about whether or not she's going to cross that line for Kratos.
Athena! You conspire against me!
You don't know where she's coming from. You don't know if she's on the side of Zeus or if she's on the side of Kratos. You don't know if she has a thing for Kratos. So I'm very eager to see where her character sort of goes as we finish the story of Kratos, because I think there's more, definitely more to Athena than we've seen so far.
In terms of sheer aggression, you can't beat the Titans.
They overthrew their parents, Kronos castrating Uranus and basically overthrowing his parents.
He dismembered his own dad, right? He'd been given a special sword, and he'd lopped off his member and overthrown his dad, and he didn't want this to happen to him. So he thought the best way to do it would be to, you know, swallow his children.
He eats all of his kids. Zeus gets pissed off, decides he's going to overthrow him.
This is the battle between the Olympians and the Titans. And this battle was, in mythological terms, basically World War I.
The battle ebbs and flows, and the gods get the upper hand at one point, and the Titans have the upper hand at the other.
The entire earth was shaking. Mountains were being torn up and thrown at each other. However, the Olympians were lucky because they had some secret weapons.
Zeus was given possession of the lightning and the lightning bolts.
And because they had the technology, the Olympians were able to crush the Titans.
The Titans weren't killed, they were just kind of banished, so they always kind of stuck around, brooding and being very angry.
They're still down there. They're still down there rumbling in the basement, and there was always the possibility that they could once again rise up.
Yes, the Titans are huge.
Well, obviously the Titans are, they're massive. They seem to look a little prehistoric.
The Titans are actually physically, a lot of them are bigger than the gods, at least when you go back and look at Greek mythology. Almost like structures and mountains come to life that sort of we felt would give the gods a good run for their money. They seem like the perfect group of allies for Kratos to hook up with and sort of take his beef right to the doorstep of Mount Olympus.
Who breaks my chains of torment?
I love the moment where Kratos is talking to Atlas, and there's this history that both of them have.
Atlas!
And the player's able to kind of hit the button while they're interacting and seeing just a tiny eye.
Still the arrogant and foolish warrior. You have not changed.
Atlas was a Titan who was charged with holding up the world.
He's holding up the flat world, and he almost looks like he's forged into the bottom crust of the earth.
You dare show your face to me after what you have done?
I was a little concerned when Corey said, oh, I want to use Michael Clark Duncan for Atlas, because his voice is so distinct that I was just like, it's Michael Clark Duncan. I'm glad I held my tongue and let Corey kind of go with his gut, because he's one of my favorite characters.
Prometheus is this interesting character because he sacrifices himself for the sake of mortals. First, he's a Titan, and he assists Zeus in overthrowing the fellow Titans, but then he gets on the bad side of Zeus when he steals the fire from the gods to warm these mortal creatures.
Because of that, Prometheus was bound to the top of a mountain and forced to have his liver eaten out by a giant eagle. And then every day he would heal, and the eagle would come back and eat his liver out again. It's pretty awesome. The gods were pretty messed up people.
It's a great gory image, and it's also a great character revealing moment about Zeus, who sort of put him in this predicament and punished him in this way, because it just shows you what a bastard, the gods are, and specifically Zeus is.
Gaia is the earth. She's the quintessential earth goddess, Earth Mother. And she's around from the very earliest phases. She has a fondness for almost all of her children, even the ones that misbehave.
I have watched you become a powerful warrior.
She sort of got her eye on Kratos and has been watching him kind of all the time. And she has a little bit of a future plan for him.
Gaia ends up being a pivotal character, and she is also narrating the story of Kratos. And at the end of this whole 3-act adventure that players hopefully will join us on, will realize what it is about Gaia that allows her to, narrate this story.
Kratos was destined to bring about change so severe that it would shake the very pillars of Mount Olympus. His death was something that I could not allow.
Medusa. She used to be a beautiful woman, and Poseidon fell in love with her, and they decided to mate.
What do you say we go into Athena's temple and make whoopee, right? And so she's like, all right, well, sure, let's get out of the rain. Well, boom, Athena hears through the grapevine, right, up on Mount Olympus, hey, there's somebody messing around in your temple.
And Athena was extremely offended by this action, and so she decided to take her anger out on not Poseidon, because he's very powerful and there was nothing she could do to him, but rather Medusa, whom she turns into a horrible creature with snakes for hair and a face that can turn anyone into stone.
The Medusa boss in this game is awesome. She's a blast to play. She looks great. But for me, the big fat green Medusa, that's not Medusa. Medusa is sleek, and she's kind of weird because she's sort of sexy and you feel kind of creepy about it, but she's kind of sexy, And so Corey's the director of this game, and Corey brings his own fantasies to this game, and that's okay, whatever.
Pegasus was born from the head of Medusa.
It's not just blood that springs out of her neck, but Pegasus, the winged horse. This is one of those moments in Greek mythology that you just can't explain anyway. It's just weird, right? It's just flat out weirdness.
Pegasus had unique powers. Every time Pegasus would strike a place with its hoof, a natural spring would rise up there. That's what Pegasus' name means, basically. It's like striking. So the hoof strike of Pegasus was a very magical thing. The Harpies were a breed of half human female and half bird, and their name comes from the Greek word to snatch or to seize. So they seem to be sort of like demons that would come around stealing things or assaulting you.
Sort of these black, fluttering, bird-like creatures that are very ominous, very threatening, and you definitely don't want them on your trail because they're completely unshakable. You can't lose them. And they are connected to the fates, kind of personification of that dark cloud or the evil following you.
Cerberus is the three-headed dog of the underworld.
His job is he'll let you pass into the underworld, but he won't let you back out.
It's natural that the underworld would also have a guard dog, but you want it to be a little bit more fantastic, so he has three heads. However, he does not seem to be a particularly successful guard dog, because most of the people that go down to the underworld can generally find their way around him.
I would probably say my favorite creature would be the Cyclops.
The Cyclops, the one-eyed creatures, and they were huge and strong like mountains.
But I think the thing I like the most about the Cyclops is the eye rip move that Kratos does when he climbs up the body and he sticks his hand in and pops the eye out. It's gotta be my favorite.
Satyrs, love satyrs. The original party animals. Well, they were the original party half animals, right? They were these fuzzy, fawn-like creatures from the waist down, and the satyrs liked to party, and they were associated with Dionysus, my favorite god, the god of wine, women, and song.
Goats were always considered very lusty creatures, and so satyrs in Pan that they're always hanging out with are always associated with sort of wild, unpredictable behavior. The Kraken enters our modern mythology through Clash of the Titans, the movie where the Kraken appears, but it's certainly not unprecedented in classical mythology because there were always sea creatures. The sea is always characterized as being a place of death.
I always thought of the Kraken as almost like the creature from the Black Lagoon. I mean, it's very humanoid. I think that's what it was in Clash of the Titans, so that's kind of long.
We just explored all kinds of avenues in order to sort of figure out what our vision of the Greek myths were. And so I think we've landed at a place that feels heroic and exciting, but also a little disturbing and a little adult and a little sexy, and I think that's pretty cool.
You are not meant to die here.
You certainly do not live up to your reputation, ghost of Sparta.
Perseus is probably the first great hero.
In the classic myth, Perseus is actually the son of Zeus by this mortal mother, Danae. Because Zeus, again, is not only a player, but he transforms. He can shapeshift. He can change his shape. So he turns himself into a golden shower, or maybe I should say a shower of gold. And it's the same old scenario. He's there with Danae. Bada boom, bada bang.
One of the things that heroes always have to do is they have to go on a quest. With the help of the gods, he manages to kill Medusa and cut her head off without being turned into stone.
Just your all-round kind of heroic Greek classic figure, the kind they built statues to. Yeah.
No! That door was my only escape.
It was absolutely a conscious decision to make all of the mortal characters sort of blockers in Kratos' way, but blockers that have a bit more personality. So when you fight him, he's on the island, he's trying to change his fate, and then he runs into Kratos and goes, oh.
I think what's neat is seeing Kratos against these more noble heroes. Because if you even know a little bit about Greek mythology, it's neat to encounter these guys. You know, it's not only is it neat to encounter them, it's neat to kill them.
The ghost of Sparta. Theseus.
Theseus is the archetypal hero of the city of Athens. He is a son of Poseidon. His most famous exploit in modern times is when he went and defeated the Minotaur.
Mythologically speaking, Theseus is a guy who just, you know, had a string. You know, he went into the Minotaur's labyrinth and he figured out a trick so he could find his way out.
So he goes in there, slays the Minotaur, saves the Athenians from this horrible burden.
Like, hey, you're the best, you know? But it really wasn't like, wow, he did tons of great deeds. It was really that one big thing, that defining moment for him. So I kind of thought it would be interesting to have that he's still this brute, tough warrior, but he's also kind of past his prime.
I serve and protect the Sisters of Fate for the glory of Zeus.
And it sort of reflected in the style of fight as well, that he's a big talker, but really he just was a guy who had a piece of string.
Do you not know who I am? Have you not heard of Icarus?
Icarus is definitely my favorite character. It's the whole lunatic, kind of crazy, old doctor.
You will never make it across. You think you can, but you cannot.
It's really dirty, eccentric old man. That's something that I can really relate with.
I will reach the Sisters of Fate, and I will use your wings to do so.
So Daedalus and his son are imprisoned on the island of Crete, and they realize that there's no way to leave except by the air. And he builds wings for himself and for his son by taking feathers and wax and basically building himself some wings.
And he warned his son Icarus not to fly too near the sun because the wax could melt. But Icarus didn't heed his father's sage counsel. He kept going up and up until he got so close to the sun, the wax of his wings started to melt.
The wings were made out of wax and they melted and deteriorated just like we wanted them to in the game. So it was kind of a no-brainer. It fell into the story perfectly, and they gameplay-wise, design-wise, they're excellent.
The thing that separates heroes from human beings is that they're human, but that they can do superhuman things. They have more fortitude, they have more courage.
They have good hearts. They are heroic. Kratos is not heroic. Kratos is driven by rage and anger and resentment. You can be as noble as you want in the God of War universe, but ultimately the animal is going to kill you, and the animal is Kratos.
Hear me, fallen god. None defy what the fates decree. That is how it must be.
The Fates were these three old crones in Greek mythology.
They're usually viewed as three old women, three nasty old women. Clotho spins the web of your life.
You will never control your threat, Kratos.
Lachesis measures it.
We've been expecting you.
Atropos, the worst of the three, cuts it.
We control your destiny, foolish mortal!
When she snipped your thread of life, that was it. Boom, straight off to the underworld.
The name of the last one, the cutter, Atropos, actually means the unwavering one, the unbendable one, the one that is implacable.
You will be the one who dies this day.
No matter how nice you are to her, it doesn't matter. You cannot change your fate.
There's a lot of wailing against your fate and crying out to the gods, but your fate is your fate. You know, you do with it what you can.
Everyone's life is a thread woven and cut by the sisters whenever they deem. So they are more powerful than the gods, more powerful than the Titans, more powerful than anybody in the mythological world.
Not even a Titan know how to reach the sisters' temple.
They're the puppet masters. I mean, they are controlling the threads of every person's life.
A very small number of characters are blessed with a gift of choice. The most famous example is the hero Achilles. Achilles finds out that he basically has a choice. He can stay and fight for Troy, and if he does so, he'll gain incredible honor and glory, but he'll die and have a very short life. The alternate is that he could go home and have a very long life and live as a complete nobody. Needless to say, we're still talking about him, so he chose the former.
Kratos' whole story is all about fate.
Now there is no hope.
We started the game showing you him killing himself, and then before he actually dies, we take you back to what led him up to that point.
There's an issue going on in the franchise and in the series about how much control will man have over his own destiny.
You no longer control my destiny.
You do not defy fate, Kratos!
Everybody's life is supposed to be mapped out. He's going to be the one person to basically not be mapped out by somebody. He's not going to let anybody, a god, a titan, or even the Sisters of Fate, control his destiny.
It's kind of like the video game version of the "Fuck You, Teenage Rebel" song. It's like, you know, I'm going to do my own shit.
Kratos, behold the island of creation, home to the Sisters of Fate.
The Island of the Fates is supposed to take place on the edge of the world, and any hero that has made it this distance is definitely a worthy one.
You seek the sisters to kill Zeus.
Everybody on the island is not only there to seek out the Sisters of Fate to change their fate, but they're all kind of reminders of the horrible things that Kratos has done in his past. Every time he turns the corner, somebody's there reminding him of what he's done.
Your soul will never find peace for what you have become.
I am what the gods have made me.
This is a guy who has his whole life really been kind of a pawn of the gods and really kind of screwed over by them. And I think now what they didn't realize they did was put him in the exact position that he needed to be to really kind of create all kinds of havoc.
Now that he is a god, he's a little bit more angry than he was in the first game, ironically. He absolutely has given up on everybody, and he just wants everybody dead. He's a bastard.